But I ran across some things that women had put on the internet that said, things I have learned as a mother. You should never toss a baseball in the air when the ceiling fan is running. When you hear the toilet flush and the words, uh-oh, it's already too late. A king-size waterbed holds enough water to fill a 2,000 square foot house 4 inches deep with water. Play-Doh and microwave should never be used in the same sentence. Super glue really is forever. A 3-year-old's voice is louder than 200 adults in a crowded restaurant. Legos will pass through the digestive tract of a 4-year-old. I don't know how they figured that one out. I don't want to know. Always look into the oven before turning it on. Going to the bathroom alone is a near impossibility. Legos, bare feet, in a dark room mean a bad night. The best way to get your child's attention is to sit down and look comfortable. I agree, I guess, with most of them. We'll be in Exodus chapter 2 this morning. We're going to talk about a couple different types of mothers. But to get us to where we are in the story, at the end of Genesis, Joseph has brought his whole family, including his father Jacob and all his brothers, to the land of Egypt. Now, Joseph was ruling as the right-hand man to Pharaoh at the time, but after Joseph was gone, things began to change. It says in Exodus 1, 6 through 10, and Joseph died, and all his brothers and all that generation. But the sons of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly and multiplied and became exceedingly mighty, so that the land was filled with them. Now a new king rose over Egypt, who did not know Joseph. And he said to his people, behold, the sons of Israel are too many and too mighty for us. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them, otherwise they will multiply. In the event of war, they will also join those who hate us and fight against us and depart from the land. So they called the descendants of Jacob either the sons of Israel or the Hebrews. The Egyptians put taskmasters over them, but after a while, they began to use violence to keep them in line. But the problem is, in verse 12 in Exodus 1, it says, the more they oppressed them, the more they multiplied and the more they spread out. So they began to dread the sons of Israel. The Egyptians were working very hard, and what happens when you work someone very hard, they get very strong. So now, not only were they very strong, but there were a lot of them. So now it became more than just a fear that the Pharaoh had of the Hebrews or the sons of Israel. In the first chapter, in verses 15 through 21, Pharaoh goes to the Hebrew midwives, 2 women named Shiphrah and Puah, and he tells them, when a Hebrew woman births a boy, I want you to kill the boy, but if it's a daughter, let her live. They don't do that. In verse 17, it says God blessed them from not doing that by letting them become mothers themselves. And so Pharaoh had to go a step beyond that. And that's what leads us to the last verse there in chapter 1. And Pharaoh commanded all his people, saying, every son who is born you are to throw into the Nile, but every daughter you are to keep alive. And so his solution to the problem of the Hebrews was genocide. That's where we are when we come into our story today. So let's look at the first 4 verses of Exodus chapter 2. Now a man from the house of Levi went and married a daughter of Levi, and the woman conceived and gave birth to a son, and when she saw that he was beautiful, she hid him for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she got him a papyrus basket and covered it with tar and pitch. Then she put the child in it and set it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. And his sister stood at a distance to find out what would happen to him. In Exodus chapter 6, verse 20, we find out that this man is named Amram, and his wife is named Jochebed. Now, the first 2 verses of this are basically to say A man met a woman, they had a child, they thought the child was beautiful, just like every other child born. So they're saying there's nothing very interesting about the birth of Moses, even though we know now how extraordinary he was as a person. And when it says she thought he was beautiful, what mother doesn't think her child's beautiful? Your child is born, he's beautiful. And yet, risking punishment and death, she gives birth to him and hides him. It says in Hebrews chapter 11, verse 23, by faith Moses, when he was born, was hidden for 3 months by his parents because they saw he was a beautiful child and they were not afraid of the king's edict. We don't have any idea how many male children died from the edict of Pharaoh. How many male children were thrown into the Nile River. But Jochebed decided she wasn't going to do that. She had faith that God was going to give her success in her endeavors to hide her child. You know, really, what else can she do? It says after 3 months, she puts him in a papyrus basket and puts him in the Nile River. 3 months marks the time that a child's lungs become fully formed. Their cries become quite a bit louder than they were at birth. So it's much more difficult for her to keep those cries quiet. But then she does something interesting. She does exactly what Pharaoh told them to do. Pharaoh said, if the baby's born, he's a male, throw him in the Nile. She puts her baby in the Nile. She puts him in a basket and puts him in the Nile. And it says she puts him among the reeds. Why among the reeds? Because it can't float away. She puts him right where she wants him. And she doesn't want him to go anywhere. And then she puts her young daughter there to watch over him. And again, what other options does she have? Can we even fathom the amount of fear that was in her heart for her child? Anybody that's had a child will understand how impossible that is. But there's many other women in the Bible who have faced some difficult situations. In Genesis 17 through 21, we meet Sarah. Sarah's been told that her husband is going to be the father of many nations, but she's old and she doesn't have kids. When she's told in her old age that she's going to have kids, she laughs. She says, yeah, now that I'm old. But God keeps his promise, and she has Isaac. In Judges chapter 13, there's a woman that we don't even know her name. Her husband was named Manoah, and she's simply called the wife of Manoah. She couldn't have kids. She was sterile and childless. And an angel finally came to her and said, you're going to have a special child. And the judge, Samson, was born to her. You look at Ruth. Ruth was a Moabite who left her own country to come with her mother-in-law, Naomi. She was a widow. She pretty much had no hope of finding a husband because it wasn't typical that Israelites would marry outside of their own race. And yet God sends Boaz to her. And Ruth becomes the mother of a child named Obed. And Obed has a son named Jesse. And then Jesse has a son named David. So Ruth is the great-grandmother of King David. That's how she was blessed. In 1 Samuel chapter 1, we have Hannah. She was childless. She was relentlessly mocked by her sister wife, Peninnah, because Peninnah had kids and she didn't. And she would go into the temple and pray. And finally, God heard her pleading. And she had Samuel, the greatest judge that Israel ever had. And so there's many, many mothers in the Bible who did very brave things. Some of them for the very reason of having a child. And so what Jochebed has done here is a complete act of faith. She has said, God, I can't control the situation any longer. I'm going to put it in your hands. I've taken care of this child as long as I possibly could. Now I'm asking you to do something about it. She was absolutely the best mother that she could be under those circumstances. Let's look at verses 5 through 10 in Exodus chapter 2. It says, "Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the Nile with her female attendants walking alongside the Nile. And she saw the basket among the reeds and sent her slave woman, and she brought it to her. When she opened it, she saw the child, and behold, the boy was crying. And she had pity on him and said, 'This is one of the Hebrews' children.' Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, 'Shall I go and call a woman for you who is nursing from the Hebrew women, so that she may nurse the child for you?' Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Go ahead.' So the girl went and called the child's mother. Then Pharaoh's daughter said to her, 'Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages.' So the woman took the child and nursed him. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses, and said, 'Because I drew him out of the water.'" Now we don't know her name from Scripture, the daughter of Pharaoh. Jewish tradition says her name was Bethiah, but the Apocrypha and the Jewish historian Josephus call her Tharmuthis. Modern scholars have even called her Hatshepsut, which sounds like the most Egyptian name of all the ones we had. She's believed to be the daughter of Seti I, because that would make her the sister of Ramesses II, Ramesses the Great, who was Pharaoh during the Jewish Exodus. But she goes to bathe at the Nile and sees a basket. And when she opens the basket, she behaves like a mother. She sees a child. She has compassion for that child. She knew what her father's decree was. It was a Hebrew child. It went to the river. So she knew if she sent that child back to the Hebrews, it was going to die. So she said, "I'll be his mother." And I think Jochebed was very, very smart here. She puts him in the river like she's supposed to. She puts it in a position it can't go anywhere. I believe, personally, that she knew that the Egyptian royalty came to the Nile River to bathe. But yet, had she stayed there herself, and they found the basket and found the child, and she came out and said, "Hey, you want me to nurse that child?" everybody would have went, "Really?" Instead, she has her daughter go, someone who's never had a child, who's not old enough to have a child. And when that little girl says, "Hey, you want me to find somebody?" it takes the suspicion away. I don't think Pharaoh's daughter was a fool. How much did she know? I don't know. Did she suspect that Jochebed was the mother? Maybe. We're not told one way or another, and we will never know. What we do know is that without hesitation, she said, "I will become his mother." She saw him, had compassion on him, and it's her. I find this point so interesting. It's her that names him Moses. In the Hebrew, it's Moshe, meaning drew out of the water. Because think about how appropriate that name is. Because many years later, he will draw the Hebrew children out of the Red Sea, just like he was drawn out of the river as a child. I think this shows that God had some involvement with the daughter of Pharaoh, that he had some influence on her. And so Moses gets to spend 4, 5, 6 years with his birth mother, learning what it means to be a Hebrew. Then he is sent to his adoptive mother, and he learns what it means to be involved in government and politics. And so because of the two mothers he had that both loved him, he became exactly the person that God needed when it came time to save his people. And it was because of the influence of both. He couldn't have done it just from one or the other. You know, we have several different types of mothers. We have biological mothers. God gives them the ability to birth children. We have adoptive mothers who are given children by God's grace. We have advocate mothers, those who fill in at times when we need it. Those like Shifra and Puah, the Hebrew midwives, who refused to kill the children and were rewarded with their own kids. And each of us have people in our lives who we're not related to, who have been mothers to us. And today is that day specifically where we honor that institution of motherhood. For those that have birthed children, for those who have raised children, for those who have encouraged and uplifted children. In Proverbs 31, we read about the wife of noble character. And in verses 26 through 29, it says, she opens her mouth in wisdom, and the teaching of kindness is on her tongue. She watches over the activities of her household and does not eat the bread of idleness. Her children rise up and bless her, and her husband also. And he praises her, saying, many daughters have done nobly, but you excel them all. Mary, the mother of Jesus, in Luke chapter 2, verses 19 and verse 51, it said, Mary treasured these things and pondered them in her heart. I love that phrase, because Mary's introduction to motherhood wasn't great. She was pregnant without being married. Even her husband was going to put her aside until an angel came to her. So most people didn't believe. They believed she'd messed up. So she had a bad reputation coming into it. She was poor. People despised her because of being pregnant and unmarried. Her family didn't even want to be involved with her. She had every reason to be bitter about being a mother. And yet it said she treasured these things in her heart. She took the very things that she could from being a mother. Those good things that make you say, yes, it's every bit worth the effort. Did it work with Jesus? In John chapter 2, verses 1 through 11, Jesus is at a wedding with his disciples. His mother happens to be there. She comes up and mentions that they're out of wine. And Jesus says in verses 3 through 5, when the wine ran out, the mother of Jesus said to him, they have no wine. And Jesus said to her, what business do you have with me, woman? My hour has not yet come. His mother said to the servants, whatever he tells you, do it. Was Mary a good mother? Mary doesn't ask Jesus to do anything about the situation. Notice that? Just points it out. Hey, don't have any more wine. Now when Jesus says, what are you trying to do to me, woman? He's doing that with a smile on his face. You can read the smile when you read the passage. He's saying, it's not really time for me to start showing what I can do. But what does he do? He does it. Why? Because he knew his mother wanted him to. It's interesting. When you read about Jesus, once you get over the birth story, you don't read about Joseph. There is nothing about him. Mary's there at his birth. She's there when he does his first miracle. She interacts with him various times in his life, but she's there at his death. She saw the complete cycle of being his mother. And Jesus does his first miracle because he had a mother that loved him. Moses grew up to be the man that he did because he had two really good mothers. I took just a minute to write down just things off the top of my head. Now, this list is completely and utterly short for what it should be. But a mother is a nurse, a doctor, a psychologist, a counselor, a chauffeur, a coach, a chef, a maid, a referee, a teacher, a stylist, a bank, an entertainer, a handyman, a psychic, a bottom cleaner, an investigator, a finder, a translator, a hygienist, a travel agent, a researcher, encyclopedia, comforter, laundry service, protector, magic worker, superhero, and so much more. I was blessed in my life to have a mother who loved and cared for me better than any mother ever cared for a child. Spoken like a true mama's boy and proud of it. But I also married a woman who was a good mother. I told her this was going to happen before I get up here. Her first Mother's Day was 28 years ago today. Nicholas was born on Saturday. His birthday was yesterday. Within 24 hours of being a mother, she gets to celebrate the day. I'm blessed to have a mother-in-law who loves her children and her grandchildren. I'm blessed to have many surrogate mamas right here in this church who love me just like their own. But Jochebed was not a perfect mother. The daughter of Pharaoh was not a perfect mother. Mary was not a perfect mother. They just did the best that they possibly could. And so don't focus on being perfect. You won't achieve that. Focus on raising your kids the way that God intends you to do it. That's the only way we can get through it. Focus on putting your faith in God and letting Him guide you in this process. Proverbs 22, verse 6 says, "Train up a child in the way that he should go. Even when he grows older, he will not abandon it." A lot of parents get confused by this verse. They say, "Roy, I did the best I could. My children won't go." I said, that's because this verse is written for the parents. It's not written for the children. It tells the parents, you do the absolute best that you can do, and the outcome most likely will be the best it will be. If you don't do it that way, the outcome is surely going to be bad. You do the best that you can. And everything doesn't have to be perfect. And when you make mistakes, just ask God for forgiveness. But forgive yourself as well. Don't be a mother holding on to guilt. It'll hurt you, but it'll hurt your child. Let that go to Him. I just want to say this morning, thank you to all the mothers. You make an impact on us that no other can do. And so this morning, before our invitation, I'd like to offer an additional blessing before our traditional one just for the mothers. So may the Lord bless all of our mothers today. Mothers like Jochebed and Mary and the daughter of Pharaoh, who've done the absolutely best they can do. They lived their lives in faith and put the raising of their children under His control. As a mother gives her life and nourishment to her children, may we all be lifted and nourished by the women that we celebrate today. Embrace them in your love, Father, and guide their heads and their hands and their feet. And may you bless them beyond measure. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make His face to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift His countenance upon you and give you peace. Let's all stand.